This wealthy woman hires a maid without knowing that it is her own daughter, abandoned since birth. It was early in the morning at Pierre Claire's grand house, where the sun struck the windows as if to awaken long-buried secrets. Mama Abbe, the housekeeper, hurried along with quick strides, fixing the drapes and reprimanding the youthful groundskeeper for neglecting the hibiscus bushes yet again. On that particular day, a cab pulled up outside the imposing entrance. A young lady emerged, gripping a modest suitcase. She was called Awa. She had traveled from a distant, arid hamlet near the waterway, where folks still bathed in the brook and kids dashed shoeless across the meadows. Becoming a servant wasn't her aspiration. Yet existence often guides your path to places your spirit resists. Moreover, it was Priest André who had dispatched her along with a note and a strong endorsement. She is diligent, tidy, courteous. Employ her. That was the message in the document Mama Abbe presented to Madame Kenny. Upon stepping inside the residence, Awa was overwhelmed by the quiet that enveloped everything. A gleaming quiet, chilly, lingering, like an exhalation paused for decades. Madame Kenny hardly looked her way. "Are you able to prepare meals?" "Yes, madame. You'll rest in the assigned spot. You talk only when addressed. Avoid any extra sounds. Got it?" "Yes, madame." She pivoted away. And so Awa's fresh chapter commenced. Awa moved into the tiny chamber by the washing area, a space without light from outside, featuring a steel frame bed and a wobbly closet. She set her luggage down with care, and deep inside, bundled in a tied cloth, rested a little crimson bead chain. She avoided displaying it openly. It was a memento, something without a clear origin. The elderly lady who nurtured her, Mama Sira, had merely stated, "This is the only thing I managed to preserve on the day you arrived with me. Hold on to it. Someday it could prove useful." That evening, solitary in her quarters, Awa steadied her breathing. She was 23, not delicate or innocent. However, within this dwelling, an odd sensation disturbed her. Not a danger, but an intuition. As though the partitions observed her, or her movements traced an unseen path. Time flowed onward. Awa adapted swiftly. She possessed a subtle manner of completing chores silently. She pressed Madame Kenny's satin shawls with nearly sacred care. She understood her preferred beverages, her literary preferences, even her pauses. The fellow servants appreciated her, reserved, compassionate. Yet there was a profound element to her, a seriousness, as if she bore a history weightier than her deeds implied. Madame Kenny started paying attention to this young lady more than she planned. Initially, it was minor details, like her grin, the folding of clothes, or placing a dish without a sound. Then her stare, straightforward, serene, but overly recognizable. She couldn't fathom why this girl provoked her occasionally and moved her at other times. She evoked a certain individual. But which one? One afternoon, Awa received the duty of arranging the compartments in the sitting area, an ancient cabinet left undisturbed for many months. As she organized documents, she discovered an aged record book, greeting cards, and a ripped picture. She replaced it, but her digits grazed a tiny sheet creased quadruple and faded with age. She wavered on, unfolding it. Ultimately, she slid it back into the compartment unspoken. But an inner stirring had occurred. For multiple evenings, she envisioned liquid, an expansive stream, a drifting container, palms releasing. She awoke perspiring, and every dawn she continued her duties as though unaffected. Mama Abbe observed her wordlessly. She was aware but bided her time. She offered prayers more frequently. One dusk, while Awa removed dishes from the dining surface, Mama Abbe halted her tenderly. "You appear exhausted, Awa. Everything fine?" "Yes, Mama Abbe." "Do you reflect on your relatives there?" "I'm unsure. At times I believe I've never truly grasped my lineage." Mama Abbe halted. She offered no reply, then whispered gently, "At times kin isn't as we assume, but the divine invariably uncovers the concealed." Awa inclined her head, yet posed no inquiries. "Not at this moment." Madame Kenny, in the interim, started sensing alterations, touchy, weary without cause. She became irritated faster, conversed less. She perceived a change in her home. She consulted a physician who detected nothing. She even arranged for the residence to be cleansed by an aged relative who ignited foliage and recited spells. Yet no shift occurred until one occasion during organizing a closet in her personal chamber. She uncovered a compact hide container untouched for ages. She unlatched it absent-mindedly. Within lay an infant's cap, a string armlet, and a shredded image. A recollection from a distant era. She returned it all hastily, but her pulse quickened. Why did Awa's features repeatedly surface when viewing that snapshot? She shared with nobody. But that evening, she envisioned a newborn in her embrace, a bassinet she deserted, and a commitment she feigned to erase. Concurrently, in her lightless chamber, Awa grasped her chain amid her digits. She lacked understanding why, but she sensed an approach, something meaningful. The periods became more burdensome, not due to labor. Awa executed her responsibilities with almost unseen accuracy, but from another factor. Occasionally she sensed her title reverberated in the quiets, as though it had been uttered here ages prior by an unfamiliar person. One weekend dawn, the servant Janebu became unwell and was directed to recuperate. Madame Kenny, averse to interruptions in her routine, commanded Awa to tidy her exclusive parlor, a restricted zone where she welcomed elite patrons for cosmetic advice or private discussions. The stone flooring was frigid, the reflectors edged in precious metal, and opulent scents arranged like valued guardians. Awa polished quietly, concentrated, when a surprise visitor appeared without notice. An elder female, elegantly attired, covered to her arms with a gentle yet assured tone. "Is Kenny present?" she inquired. "I'll summon her, madame." "Hold on. You're fresh, correct?" "Yes, madame." "Your name?" "Awa." The lady hesitated, her eyes dwelling overly long on Awa's countenance. Awa, a charming title. From where? The hamlet of Segu. "Sue?" the lady whispered, her gaze tightening. "I'm familiar with that area well. I visited there ages past. Quite ages past." "How many weeks here?" "Several." She grinned, but in discomfort lingered in her grin. "You resemble a person I once knew. A dignified female. Quite isolated." Prior to Awa's reply, Madame Kenny stepped into the space, graceful in her deep blue garment. "Ah, Yande. You're ahead." "I arrive early when I foresee a lengthy day," the lady answered with a grin. She rested a quick palm on Kenny's limb, then continued. "I was conversing with your recent helper. She's unique. From the countryside, reserved, neat. That's sufficient for me." But Yandai stayed quiet briefly, her eyes wandering to Kenny's jewelry. "You realize, what we enter always emerges elsewhere, right?" "Cease, Yandai." Madame Kenny exhaled. "The past is settled. You critiqued me sufficiently 20 years back. I'm not critiquing, merely stating the atmosphere has altered in your abode, and I advise caution." Awa caught this from the adjacent space, uncomprehending. She hadn't realized yet that the murmurs among these females alluded, without stating, to a history she bore in her blood. The following dusk she chose to compose a message to Mama Ser. It wasn't for dispatch, no destination, but a method to inscribe thoughts. "Mama, it seems I've reached the location you avoided naming. You fostered me with gentleness, yet you never disclosed my true origins. Here, items are lovely, but all appears secured. I sense treading on delicate terrain, as if every stride might reveal something entombed. There's this female. She's robust, striking, but an element exists in her, something I perceive without identification. Have you encountered her visage as well? Is there an aspect you concealed to safeguard me?" She creased the message and placed it in her luggage amid her journal and the cloth with the chain. The subsequent day, per Mama Abe's instruction, she ventured to the bazaar solo. A basic errand: acquire seafood, bulbs, and new seasonings. But that occasion, she wandered. Not in the lanes, but in recollections that arose at a vendor's booth. An aged female vended textiles. As Awa strolled past, she spotted a faded scarlet material with a shell design that struck her like a blow. She paused, her core throbbing without reason. "Wish to purchase?" the aged female queried. "No. That is, it appears I've viewed this textile previously. It's an ancient motif. They donned it by the stream when birth attendants bounded around infants." "Infants?" "Indeed. For safeguarding, It was a natal rep. You understand, dear? Certain textiles recall more than individuals. Awa obtained a fragment. She lacked reason. She creased it, stroked it, and headed back with an odd sensation, as if nearing an entity. That dusk, while storing provisions in the cooking area, Mama Abby slipped in quietly. She regarded Awa, then the material fragment on the surface. Where did you acquire that? At the bazaar. It seemed known. Mama Abbe drew near gradually, contacting the material with her tips as if caressing an ancient injury. This wrap, I believe it encountered you prior to me. Awa glanced upward. Mama Abby, do you possess knowledge about me that I lack? An extended quiet ensued. Then the elder female uttered plainly, I understand verity arrives invariably, but not prior to its moment. She departed, abandoning Awa with her reflections, and the material held to her chest. The dwelling appeared more hushed than typical that evening. Even the normally whimsical breeze had withdrawn into deferential quiet. Reclining on her slim mattress, Awa gazed at the dull overhead. Nothing visible there, but her thoughts sought illumination. She sensed drifting toward a verity still hazy, as if the surroundings attempted to convey a tongue she hadn't grasped yet. The periods reclaimed their pattern. Madame Cani entertained visitors, participated in gatherings, and conducted extended calls from her transparent parlor. Awa assisted her faithfully, uttering little, but ever available when required. With every exchange, a subtle vibration existed between them, unnoticed by others. Something pending, unexplainable, a connection, or maybe a stretched cord between two shores of the identical stream. One dusk, while Madame Cani attended a formal event, Awa received permission to utilize the dwelling's archive, a secured chamber brimming with ancient volumes and dusty recollections. Mama Abi had handed her the opener, stating, Go learn a little. You've performed admirably. You may peruse, but restore all as discovered. Awa stepped in with respect. The space reeked of aged sheets, hide, and something stirring, as if the barriers themselves guarded mysteries. She traced her digits over the volume backs, then amid two sheets uncovered something more personal, a snapshot of a youthful female, far younger, perched on a seat, her palm on a curved abdomen, her stare far off, solitary, without joy. That countenance, she recognized it. She encountered it daily. It was Madame Kenny, expectant. Awa's core halted briefly, not from dread, but from astonishment. But she sealed the collection softly, replaced it, and exited the space as if emerging from a vision, her inhalation brief. She lacked certainty what to consider. It could be insignificant, an aged, overlooked snapshot sans narrative. That evening, she scarcely rested. The following day, she intensified her concentration on duties as if to demonstrate she'd observed nothing. But her actions ceased being mechanical. Her thoughts orbited that depiction, rousing formless, youthful remembrances. One midday, one of Madame Kenny's aged relatives appeared without warning, a lofty, commanding female enveloped in an aroma of smoke and ebony cleanser. Upon entering, her gaze landed on Awa. She observed extensively without uttering, then drew Mama Abby aside in a nook of the parlor. That young one, she murmured. I've encountered her someplace. She's a servant, Mama Abby answered, her tone wary. Don't deceive me, eh? She bears our clan's features. Don't you observe her facial bones, her orbs, even her palms? They're akin to Canny's ancestors. You're speaking overly audibly, yea. Do you believe the divine slumbers? Do you think the offspring we discard don't return to tread our paths? Observe that young one. She's not present by coincidence. She departed, burdening Mama Abby further on her bosom. In the ensuing periods, Awa observed the glances transforming, not spiteful, but restless, doubtful, as if anticipating her to uncover something she solely couldn't perceive yet. She chose to compose another message, this occasion to herself. A puzzle exists here. I perceive it. I inhale it. But why fear posing the correct inquiries? Do I possess the entitlement to comprehend my identity? Is seeking disloyalty? At times I detect remorse in that female's orbs, something unspoken, something that frightens and attracts me concurrently. She placed the message beneath her bedding. The subsequent day, she resolved to see Priest Andre, the individual who had directed her here. The aged cleric resided in a humble rectory encircled by texts and healing plants. "Awa," he uttered upon sighting her. "What brings you here, my dear?" "Priest, why did you direct me to that dwelling?" He regarded her extensively, then exhaled. "Because I heeded a summons I didn't completely comprehend. At times the divine nudges his offspring where verities slumber. And you, Awa, bear a verity none can enter eternally. Do you know my mother's identity?" He averted his gaze. "I understand affection can terrify and ancient injuries can mute even the boldest. But I trust you'll discover what you sought independently. And when that occasion arrives, you'll need to select. Pardon or escape." Awa departed disturbed. She hadn't obtained a direct response, but she sensed all converging like a gradual, hushed, inevitable surge. Upon returning to the dwelling that dusk, Madame Kenny was in the yard, solitary, an uncommon view, seated beneath the fruit tree as the heavens glowed amber, the sun dissolving amid the foliage. Awa neared gradually. "Madame, shall I fetch you some beverage?" Madame Kenny lifted her gaze, observing her extensively, then uttered, "No, simply remain. Sit momentarily." It was the initial occasion she'd requested this. Awa positioned herself a few paces distant, not overly near, not overly remote. A quiet descended between them, but something transcending language transpired, as if two essences once parted acknowledged one another in the dimming illumination. Awa sensed an odd heat in her neck, but remained silent. Madame Kenny, her gaze wandering in the limbs, whispered gently, "You realize, I frequently envisioned a girl child I might have possessed. And at times I ponder if visions attempt to convey something." Awa offered no reply. But that evening she didn't rest. She understood the barriers would utter soon. The subsequent dawn, the illumination sifted gently through the blinds, projecting faint stripes on the flooring of a day that would differ from prior ones. Awa arose early from her resting place. She lacked reason, but all within her was tense, prepared, as if awaiting a cue the cosmos would provide. As she exited her chamber, she encountered Mama Abe, who had awakened pre-dawn as customary. They shared an extended glance. This occasion, no facades, no partial quiets. "Prepared," Mama Abe breathed, her tone scarcely heard. "I believe so," Awa responded, composed but resolute. "She's awaiting you in the parlor." Madame Kenny was positioned, her stare fixed, strained but resolved. On the low table she had set a compact ebony wooden container, its finish worn, the one Mama Abe concealed in the extra chamber, the one she had once interred like a scar. When Awa stepped in, she noticed it instantly, and her core accelerated, intensified. Madame Kenny motioned with her palm. "Sit." Awa complied. An extended quiet transpired. Then Madame Kenny unlatched the container gradually. She removed a tiny faded infant cap and a snapshot which she set upright on the surface. Awa identified the female. It was her. Canny, more youthful, more vulnerable, but distinct. "I bore you," she uttered finally to Awa. 23 years past, you were minuscule, so shadowy, with elongated digits like my sire's. I cradled you to me for an entire evening, uncertain of action, and at dawn, I resolved to erase you." Awa remained silent, yet she didn't weep. "I feared. I was isolated. Your coming endangered all I'd constructed. Your sire never desired awareness of you. I was youthful, imprudent, driven. So I delegated you to a sage female who vowed never to disclose your being, and I pledged to obliterate you from memory." She grasped the crimson chain from Awa's palm, grazing it with her tips. "This chain, I affixed it to you the evening prior to your departure. It belonged to my mother. I never anticipated viewing it again. When I spotted it on you weeks prior, I felt faint. But I convinced myself it was improbable, that it couldn't be you, that the divine wouldn't be so harsh or equitable. I've possessed it eternally," Awa whispered. Mama stated it was all she could retain from my history. Madame Kenny sealed her orbs briefly, her exhalation quivering. "I never bore additional offspring. I observed you develop here without identifying. And yet daily I sensed something eroding. I regarded you as one regards an ancient vision. And now, excuses are absent. She arose gradually, circled the table, and knelt before Awa. "Madame, avoid this," Awa uttered. "I'm not requesting pardon or even acceptance, but I owe you verity, and I desired you to hear it from my lips, not from others, not subsequently. Today I wish to declare you are my girl child, my sole girl child." Awa sensed her palms quiver, her inhalation brief. Briefly her whole history flashed, the extended days questing a countenance, the semi-murmured invocations, the unresolved queries. And now the resolution was present before her, unprocessed, vital, unanticipated. She stabilized her palm. "I lack certainty what to experience yet," she uttered, "but I'm present and I'm attentive." A broad quiet descended over the chamber. Then gradually, tenderly, Madame Kenny sobbed, droplets of remorse. That dusk, Mama Abe readied a broth that evoked youth, not for visitors or superiors, but for the parent and offspring. Awa consumed gradually. Madame Kenny scarcely consumed, but lingered at the table with her. The servants murmured and speculated about Awa. "We realized that young one wasn't typical," they informed Mama Abe. "Now she'll behave elevated since she's superior." "Relax, my dears," Mama Abe uttered. "Avoid envy of the lady's offspring. Maintain purity in your souls toward others, and you'll witness existence grin at you eventually. Heed my counsel." Following the repast, Awa retrieved her journal where she inscribed her messages and reflections. She flipped to the initial sheet and softly ripped the notation she'd composed to herself days prior. She balled it and discarded it. She no longer desired to escape or speculate. She desired to be. Subsequently, as the dwelling nearly slumbered, she tapped gently on Madame Kenny's sleeping chamber portal. "Enter," uttered a fatigued but mild tone. Awa stepped in. The chamber was immersed in cozy illumination, a thin cover, and a volume on the resting place. "I desire knowledge," Awa uttered. "I desire all knowledge. Who was my sire? Why such fear? Why release me? Not to condemn, but since I refuse to traverse blindly through my existence anymore." Madame Kenny beckoned her to perch on the resting place edge, and that evening, she narrated extensively about her youthful periods, her errors, a prohibited affection, the offspring she attempted to erase, but her essence could never release. She narrated her drives, her concessions, her wakeful evenings. The further she narrated, the more her tone fractured, the more her stare humanized. Awa attended without disruption. When she concluded, no additional queries, merely a calming quiet. Awa arose, stepped toward the portal, then halted. "I lack certainty what I'll do with this all," she uttered. "But I comprehend one aspect, Mama." Madame Kenny recoiled gently at the term, hearing it initially. "I'm present now, and I'm no longer an outsider," Awa uttered. She departed, and that evening, for the initial occasion in 23 years, the dwelling appeared to inhale. Several months subsequently, a subtle transformation happened. Awa ceased donning the servant's attire. She ceased residing in the lightless chamber. She now possessed her personal chamber, adorned per her preference, near her mother's workspace. At Madame Kenny's urging, she commenced administration studies. Her parent perceived in her more than a successor, a spark, a prolongation, a fresh commencement. In this repaired connection, in this gradual rebuilding, there existed a verity. At times, origins roam, coil, and stray, but they invariably reclaim the soil. And in that dwelling once brimming with quiet, there was now something more robust,